where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out. Give us your perspective. Welcome to Perspectives on Social Justice, where we are continuously giving the world a voice. I'm Lairalaine White, your host, and today we are talking about love. Our country, our states, our cities, our communities, and our neighborhoods have been in a pandemic. We've been pandemic stricken. Cultures have been targeted with racial violence, laced with police brutality. Our democracy has faced a turbulent election season, and it was capped with an ultimate attack on our democracy. So at this very hour, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. The songwriter says that it's the only thing that there's just too little of. This Valentine week, we want to discuss how we can aid and, if possible, expedite the healing of the land with this thing called love. And it is my belief that we can encompass a range of strong and positive healing emotions and outcomes, from the most subliminal good, which exists in all of us, to our deepest and simplest, most quiet needs. Greek philosophers have identified 6 forms of love. You may have heard of some of them: family love, platonic love, romantic love, self-love, and last but not least, God's divine love, known as agape love. And then in 1986, Cornell University's Robert Sternberg recently proposed a color wheel of love, consisting of passion, commitment, intimacy. So when we speak about love, let's be passionate about our healing and recovery. Let's stay committed to building up a beloved community based on hope and securing our neighbors. And let's develop nurturing relationships in an effort to maintain our own color wheel of love. As a professional in ministry, I challenge all church leaders to incorporate this notion of a color wheel into the programming of your congregations and your parishes. Love is the ultimate healing balm. And now tonight, I have invited some, especially for the Women's Laboratory. This is Women's Laboratory night, and I've invited some remarkable women to share in this conversation of love and acceptance. And we hope that you will all be pleased. Our first guest is Dr. Rene Minter, and I'm going to let her introduce herself to you and talk to you a little bit about her. Dr. Minter, thank you for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself, and so that our listeners and viewers will know who you are.
Well, hi. Thank you very much for even inviting me. I am Reverend Dr. Rene Minter, and I'm coming to you from New York, snowy, cold New York, but I have love in my heart. And I'm just so happy to be here. I'm a Christian psychotherapist, and I also have a faith-based following. I'm also an author. I've had 4 anthologies, and I'm so grateful that my last one, which is really a book about faith, actually hit the Amazon bestseller list in 4 different categories. So I'm here today to talk about love, maybe from a different perspective, maybe a way that others haven't thought about, but I'm ready to jump in. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And we also have Reverend Holeness-Roland. And you just talk a little bit, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Thank you. Hello, good evening, everyone. I also have love in my heart too, Dr. Mentor. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Reverend Lairalaine. I am a assistant pastor at Adams Inspirational AME Church in Fort Washington, Maryland, and I work with youth at Big Bethel AME Church in Atlanta, Georgia. You can follow me on at Raising Roland on Instagram and check out what I'm doing there, and also at Holeness-Roland on Instagram. I am wearing a crown, and I custom design floral crowns. So every woman needs a crown, not just at Valentine's Day, all of the time. So check us out, see what we're doing.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that. And last but not least, we have the Reverend Kim Shelton. Reverend Shelton, talk to us about who you are and introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies, and the distinguished Reverend Dr. Lairalaine for inviting us to this panel. I'm always excited to be among the sisterins as we talk and share together. I am Reverend Kim Shelton. I'm the pastor of Good News Community Church all the way in Chicago. So I mimic you, my sister in New York. It is cold and snowy here as well. But hey, there's love in our hearts, so it's heating up the room. It's heating up the spaces in our lives. So glad to be with you all and excited to talk about love, God's love, and just love in general.
All right. Well, let's just start this season. This season can turn into a time of acceptance and social reform. I've a little bit earlier how this color war, it's kind of like where it come from. You know what? I would love your perspective on look. Dr. Mitchell, start out. I think we have some audio, but talk about your philosophy of love and how can this become a day of acceptance and social reform?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for letting me actually come up first and speak about my perspective. We are a product of our environment, and I'm a product of my family. And what I was taught as a child was that love is not just an emotion, but love is an action word, and that is something that we do. Love is something that we give, that we love our neighbors. And being born in a household of faith, we learned about First Corinthians, the 13th chapter, and what it means to be non-judgmental and to care about our neighbors and to care about those who are less fortunate. So yes, we know about the eros love, we know about the agape love, but I was also told that it's important that we have the Philly love, the love for our neighbors, for our friends. And that's really the perspective that I'm looking at for this Valentine's Day. Like, how can we take on some of the principles, or myself, take on some of the principles of love in action towards mankind in this pandemic?
Awesome. Anybody else?
Yes, of course. I think for me, love is you. I wrote notes even. I think you need it. You can't, I know I need it. I can't live without it. And I often think about we can live, we can't live without food. Without food, we'll die. Well, I feel like without love, you're going to die too. It's going to be a very slow, painful death. And I think that I agree with the statement about agape love. If it's not that truly, I'm sorry, I just don't really want it in my life. I guess that's a high standard for living, but really knowing how much and how deeply God loves us, I think that it's harder to accept junk. Someone telling you that they love you and treating you like crap. I think it is very action oriented, and for me, it started in the home. My understanding and experience of love, that very first relationship with my parents. My mother has just shown love to me in such a deep way that throughout my life, I was not willing to accept much less than that. And so I think that, that standard, that understanding, it truly gives you a different type of walk. And and I guess even philosophy on love, and that it's can't live without it, gotta have it. So
Yeah, just to mimic what both of you all said. And Bell Hook's book is all about love. She has this quote that says, "Love is an act of will, both in intention and in action." Right. So, as both of you are talking about, love is an action. That means it's a verb. That means you have to do something, right? Because some people think it's a noun. So, but it's a verb, meaning it's an action word, right? And so, it's what we do, is how we embody ourselves and how we embody each other. And it's intentional. And it just doesn't happen by itself, but it's intentional. And that's in everything you do. I do a lot of justice work, and that is a work of love. When we do justice work as well. So I know Valentine's Day is coming up, so we're talking about that love too. But I want to talk about community love too, because it's also Black History Month. So I want to talk about community love and the beloved community and how we put that love to action, and that it's intentional.
you're so right, Reverend Kim. And that even makes me think about, I recently, as I was saying, check me out on at Raising Roland, but I just did a post just the other day about that very thing. And just the extension of community and how deep it goes, and how for us as Black folks, it is so, it is so essential. And we have seen it. We have seen sacrifice as love. Just I thought of Ernie Green, of one of the Little Rock Nine, and how him and the Little Rock Nine sacrificed, and how others have sacrificed. The boycotting, the protesting, Black Lives Matter, all of these sacrifices for a collective gain. Not an individual gain, but a collective gain. What deeper display of love could you have than someone to put their life on the line, for you? And so I agree, Reverend Kim, as we are looking at a more communal, we see, as Black folks, I think we see it all the time. I hear about it. We didn't need the welfare system, because I hear my grandmother talking about how she would place kids or help kids get to homes, or feed when parents didn't have food, and different things like that. And so I think that when we really think about the reality of what love truly looks like for us, it is so deep, and it is so communal, and it's like that agape. So,
well, I'm loving this dialogue, and having these different perspectives on love. And I just want to know, so what do you think? How do you think we've talked about these different aspects where love exists, but with COVID depriving us of these human connections, because we've had to self isolate, we've had to quarantine, etc. So with COVID depriving us of this human connection, do you think that this has had an impact on, or has affected the impact of love? Because I'm seeing all these different places, all these different things. You've got Match.com is saying, hey, we're going to do it virtually. Now Facebook is saying they're going to do something. And so with COVID depriving us of the human connection, where we can touch one another, where we can hug one another, where we can kiss one another, do you think this will affect us mentally, the mental aspect of love? What do you, anybody?
I think what we learned is how to love creatively
Okay.
during this pandemic times, right? And so this whole thing about presence, and so you might not have to be present like right in front of each other, but we can still honor presence of one another. So I think we've learned to be creative in this pandemic of how to love, how to express love. And so I think we've been creative. There's lots of FaceTime happening, when we're looking at each other, video conferencing more than face to face, which has a little bit of a dynamic as well. You're just not physically touching each other, but you see each other. You get to see the expression of one another, and you still get to share in such a way. So I believe this pandemic has taught us to love creatively and authentically, because at this point there's no airs. There's nothing you can hide at this point. Everybody at home. So I think we've learned to be authentic as well as be creative in our love. But it's happening out there. I just think people are just doing it differently.
I wanted to point out that, I see, and I'm in New York City, I'm in New York City, and, you see just about anything here in New York City. But I think the greatest show of love was really um, came about through the pandemic when we saw people selflessly giving, the nurses, the first responders, really, really just pitching tirelessly, giving with an open hand, and all of us coming together in this crisis. And another time when I can think about seeing something like that was in 9/11, how we all came together as united people working towards a common good. So we're seeing love. Yeah, we might not see the kissing and the hugging and all of that, but we're still seeing love in action. And
Mhm.
it's caring for those in our community and those globally around the world who are affected with COVID. So I think we're seeing
Yes.
a different type of love, but I think we're seeing love. The other thing, and I don't want to take up too much of the time, but one of the other things that I learned from the millenniums, which is particularly important at this season, is about self-love.
Mhm.
And what I'm seeing is that people are actually trying to become a better version of themselves during the COVID. So some people are going back to school. Some people are, earnestly working on really becoming a better person and taking care of themselves. For many of us, it's eating properly. For many of us, we can't go to the gym, but we're exercising at home. So we are trying to become the best version of ourselves. So self-love, maybe we need to add that to the list of, what love really is.
Excellent point. I love it. Because during this pandemic, when it was just you and only you, uh, you got to learn to love you. When you look around, it's only you in the room. I
Hmm.
think that had really had people pause. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I paused.
Hmm.
To really begin to look at self-love when you're so used to doing and being, and now it's just you. So you learn to pause and realize the things that you like, the things about you that you like, and things you may not like, but you had
Hmm.
a chance to sit in the room with yourself and
Right.
do some self-reflection, some self-inventory, and then practice some self-care and some self-love.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that was big for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't know when we come back, if people gonna be able to go anywhere and do anything. They love themselves so much, but you're right, Minister, that it
Yeah.
was parallel
Hmm.
that we began to start practicing some self love, which was needed, I'm sure,
Hmm.
with everyone. I just think this pandemic had a little bit more pros than it had cons. Of course, the death of people, we're not
Hmm.
taking that away, but just to have the world pause for a minute
Yes. Yes.
and then reset and then
Hmm.
reset. I think that was important. Good stuff. Yeah.
I want to respond to the question in the Facebook. It says, "What are some ways we can love ourselves, and any recommendations?" And I think that I was laughing when you said, that you can really take a note from millennials. Just fitting in that category. Self care
Hmm.
is a big thing for me, and I think that a part of it too is that as Black folks, we're so used to pushing, 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 striving, 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 that often we don't realize what that does to us, in the long run, and what that can, the impact of all of that can do to us. And so I think for me, some of the ways that I would intentionally love myself is to take, to really care for myself. Maybe it is going over the top to get my nails done for $75, but getting that manicure, that's for me, it's almost essential. Getting that pedicure, it's almost essential. Taking a
Yes.
nice relaxing bath, that's essential. Cutting the lights off, shutting technology down, not checking into Facebook all the time, taking a step back from Instagram. I think all of those things are self-care, because in this society, it's a capitalistic society, so we see marketing all around us because everybody's trying to get a dollar, and so I think that when you're inundated with all of that, it can just be overwhelming. They talk about sensory kids for children because of the just sensory overload, and sometimes I feel Facebook overload or Instagram overload. And so I think sometimes just taking a step back can really be helpful for me to answer that question. But then, I guess, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Rene, you were saying?
No. Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I just see another.
Yeah, I was gonna
another question.
That one. That's where I was going. So I'll follow you.
Okay, well, what I was going to say, it's the question is, what about married couples? What can it do for us? Go back to when you were first dating. Go back to some of the cute little things that you used to do, writing notes, little surprises, things, and packing something special, a special love note inside their lunch, little surprises, things on the mirror. I love you. Little surprises that you can do to remind that person just how much you love them. Go back to your first love, what it was that brought you together. Re-examine those things, and I'm sure it won't take you long to find ways. Also, ask your partner, what would make you happy? What would you like me to do for you? What about a good conversation? Turning off technology, just like my sister said. What about just reinventing who the two of you are?
That is so true. As a married couple, as a member of a married couple, I think that it is so interesting during this time because I think Reverend Shelton, you said it. You said, what do you do when you're alone? Well, as a married couple, you're sitting at home with each other, and so it's like you're sort of you're not separating. There's not a real space that you're going away to because this is home. You're coming back together, and at this time, everything's happening inside of the home. And I think for my husband and I, like we developed our own special groove at this point in time, but it took time. It took a lot of time because everyone's lives shifted and transitioned at the same time. So versus, someone in the household getting a new job or someone in the household getting a new hobby, everything's happening to everybody. Kids are no longer in school the same way, no longer at this house or that house, like play dates look different. So the whole world is completely different. And I think that, for me and my husband now, like I even got us a little activity book just to give us some extra ideas. Not that we need them, but, just in case stuff during quarantine, what are we doing? Some of us are collecting stuff. So I guess it's one of those things that I probably look back on and say, oh, why did I get that? But it just, I agree with you, taking the time to really actually do some things with each other that maybe you haven't done. Like we've done a couple cooking classes, a couple painting sets, just different things like that. And so I think that just being intentional about the love and making sure that your spouse knows that you love them every day, not just on Valentine's Day,
Exactly.
But checking in on them on a Monday and saying, hey, can I rub your feet on a Sunday? Whatever it may be. I don't know.
How about coupons? Making coupons for each other.
I love those.
Mm-hmm.
Those are so nice. But those would be my recommendations to marry.
I would say, we'll go back to this buzzword, the love languages, right? Get Gary Chapman's book and learn each other's love language, new and improved. It may have changed. You might have done it 10 years ago and maybe things have changed. So just go back and reintroduce yourselves, because sometimes we've evolved over the last, 7 years. So maybe you might have to reintroduce yourself. And I think that would be fun as well. But like, again, be creative. I told you love has to be creative. As Reverend Holiness said that, we got to keep the fire spike going. So we got to ignite it. So be creative. Be creative. Get some books.
Sorry.
Get some books. Look at some videos. No, be creative.
I was just going to say also, keeping in mind, I didn't even think about this until just a moment ago, but we're all like a lot of households are grieving, so that's something to take into account too.
Yes.
Like, just making sure you have access to the resources that you need, because at a time when you're again in your house and, if your spouse's parent has passed or a cousin, like I've just lost 2 relatives in the past 2 weeks. And so for us, that's tough, but you never know how people experience grief and how they live it out. So that can be a bit easy way to a divorce is all I'm saying. So, check in with yourselves and at least give yourself what you need and get access to the resources that you need.
If I
If
could just
you need
add
them.
one piece to that, this is the time of year, and I'm a psychotherapist. So this is the time of year that we experience seasonal affective disorder called SAD. So we're already experiencing that. Now you add on the pandemic. Now you
Yeah.
add on those who have lost friends and loved ones. So this is that time where a phone call makes a difference. This is that time where a note makes a difference because you don't know. People may look okay on the outside, but grief goes far, far longer than just the 6 weeks or so. So, yeah. Remember seasonal affective disorder. Remember the impact that depression may have. People might not be eating right. They may not be sleeping well. So just check in on people because they need us.
So here's an interesting question too from one of our Facebook viewers that y'all might be able to address. What should we do with the kids? How do we, I guess, that's get kids? How do we help the kids to grieve over lost relatives to COVID? Because that's been happening too.
I don't mind because I do a little grief ministry with kids, talk about it. I think sometimes the big people don't talk to the little people. And, the big people are trying to figure out their grief, but then there's little people who are also grieving. So I
Yes.
would just say, talk to them about it, have some conversations, see what they're feeling about, and be able to kind of have some conversation. I think it's really important for them to try to figure out how to process that. Sometimes we leave the processing to the little children who don't know how to process grief like that. And so they cry a lot or they act up. But I just say, talk to them. There's some great children books out there. You go to your librarian that talks about grief and you can kind of read them and help engage that conversation as well.
Yes.
But I would say definitely acknowledge that they are grieving. If you lost somebody, they lost somebody. And so acknowledge that they too are grieving, and have the conversation with them and allow you to be authentic with them and talk about how you feel. So that can also give them language to talk about how they feel as well. I think sometimes we miss that piece with the children, but they grieve just like we grieve. And I think we
Yes.
focus a lot on their grief and just figure they'll get over it. And they really don't get over it because they don't know how to process it.
And I would imagine that there's a great deal of processing that they're going through right now. Just the idea of it's a pandemic. I got to stay home. I can't go to school, and
The loss.
then on top of that, having to deal with a parent or another relative that they lose to COVID. It has to go to the hospital, being on a respirator, not being able to have access. So, yeah, that's, and I really like the idea that you have, Reverend Shelton, about going and finding books to help that they can read to kids. So that's a good idea. Anything else?
I think that safe spaces are very important at this time. Spaces where young people feel like they can really be their whole and authentic self because they're stuck in the house. And so, they're doing a lot of pleasing, they're sticking to the parents' rules. The level of freedom for a lot of our young people is just not what they had before. And I mean, I'm sure we can all imagine that that's not the easiest task for them. So I think just safe spaces where they can bring their whole, full, authentic selves and hear and know that they are beautifully and wonderfully made is essential at this time. So I think, as a youth pastor, that's what we've been doing since COVID. And I think it's been helping. We've heard about the deaths of teachers that young people have been dealing with, and just the various things, and just beginning the process of stating it, sharing it, letting someone know, knowing that someone cares, that you're not in it by yourself, and that it's, because we've been in COVID with them all this time. So now they're beginning to come around and you're hearing different things along the way. So I think that that's essential, just creating the safe spaces where they can really come as who they are without judgment, without question.
Wow, we get a lot of questions tonight. Let's see. Then we have another one that says, "What are ways that the elderly can cope?" I guess for some reason Facebook won't allow to say their names, but I guess what she means or he means is that I guess with the love during, especially in the wake of the pandemic. Anybody want to?
Well, we don't have the ability for the elderly to go to the centers. And, that's where they had, at least here in New York, that's where they had a lot of their activities. And that was their family. Those who were fortunate enough to still have spouses. That looks a little bit different now. Your spouse may
Mhm.
be, in the hospital and you may be at home, or so it looks totally different, but this is where we have to rely on our village. And that's where I'm saying, we should be calling the grandmother, the great aunt, whoever, and checking in on them. You never know how much a phone call will last. And also sending them notes. They're from that generation. They're not from technology where, they know how to FaceTime and all of that. But how much time does it take to write a note and just to put it in the mail? Because a note is something they can look at over and over and over again, and it brings love with it. So staying in contact, but maybe staying in contact in the way that they know, not so much techno savvy, if you understand what I'm saying. Something that's familiar to them, but that phone call, make the phone call. How you doing, Grandma? Or
Yeah.
how you doing, Miss So and So? Checking in on them.
And that's a great point because just today and really all this week, my mom has been writing.
Mhm,
She's been writing letters. You
mhm,
know, I mean, she has iPad, computer, cell phone, all of those things. She loves talking on the telephone, but she's been writing a lot of letters, and
mhm,
she's having me to take them to the post office and mail them, to different
mhm,
people. I mean, several letters. I mean,
mhm.
who hand writes letters anymore? But that is a
Right.
way for her to communicate the way
Mhm.
she knows how to communicate. And so I know that's very therapeutic for her. Yeah, that's some good stuff to mention. Now, I want us to close out because this has been an awesome, uh, this has been some awesome feedback, some awesome conversation and reflection on love, and I just want us to kind of close out with and um, we may have already given this. I think I asked the first question about the philosophy of love, but in the wake of the racial unrest that we experienced this summer, the turbulent election season, um, and the challenge to our democracy, what's going on right now on Capitol Hill. Um, can we identify at least one way that this country can 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 show love? Can utilize love to heal itself? I know I say that with the last presidential administration, one phrase that came out was fake news, right? So I would say that this country may need to kind of come up with a new tag, and it might mean may have to do something with real love. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Yeah.
That's what I have to
Yeah.
offer in terms of
Mhm.
how can this country kind of start its campaign for love
Right.
opposed to what's been going on. And I love to hear use your
Yeah.
recaps and your
Cornel West says, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public.
all right.
Right.
Oh,
That never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. Um, and so he talks about justice work being public work, and that's the work of love. And so when we're looking at what can we do for our nation, I know our President Biden and Vice President Harris had talked about bringing back the spirit of the nation. And I think what that spirit is justice work, is unity work, is love work. And so I think what we can begin to do is begin to build in our community this beloved community. And we could start right there where we are at home. How do we build a beloved community where justice is happening, where love is happening, where we're caring for each other? We've seen it in the pandemic, and we've seen it in the protests. So now we need to see it after all of that is gone.
Yeah.
I think that would be right where we start. And I think that itself would just be love, and justice illuminated.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Anybody else?
Yes, I think that what Maya Angelou would tell us is just true. Love does give us the opportunity to feel free, and as James Baldwin would say, it also allows us to take off the mask. And so I think that we went through yes, we experienced the fake news era, and so now we know what's really going on. And so now that we have been forced, some of us, to take off the mask, now we can really see what we're working with and move forward towards a more inclusive future that allows us to understand the value of each individual person and their own uniqueness.
I love that. Absolutely. Like we say in seminary, ashe.
Asheo.
I think for my piece, I think that when I look at COVID and I think about the impact globally, COVID did not just affect women. It didn't just affect men. It didn't just affect straight, gay, it affected everyone.
Everybody.
And it was a diversity of people globally that were affected. And then I look at the diversity that we have with the new administration. So I think if I look at the definition of love, and I always go back to 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, I think about tolerance. I think about being non-judgmental. And if we have not learned that COVID has united us, then we certainly probably haven't learned much at all. But when we come out of this, a global community united in victory over this, and we look at what's going on in Washington right now with the diversity, I think we have to learn that it's no time for hate. It's time for love. And it's time for us to move past the racial divide. It's time for us to move away from the way we were doing things before. We have to unite. And the only way that we can do that is with love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very powerful. Very powerful. Thank you very much, ladies, for your insight. Thank you for your participation and your perspectives on love. And my prayer is that somebody out here will be blessed by the word. Somebody would have heard what each of you have had to say, and be transformed, and not leave, as we say in the church, not leave this meeting the same way we came.
Amen.
Amen. So to close out, I want to, thank everyone for being a part of this conversation. And I just want to, remind everybody. I always say about the quote from Dr. King that whatever affects one affects us all. But most importantly, we need to remember in the wake of what we've been through in 2020 and just a little bit of 2021. That there are three things that remain. The Bible says that there now these three things. There's faith, there's hope, and there's love. But the greatest of these, I don't care what's going on, the greatest of these absolutely is love. And on that note, I want to say good night, everybody. And tune in on next week. We'll be talking, we'll have our climate. We'll be talking about the climate crisis, a different kind of conversation, but a relevant one all the same. Good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in.
Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out. Give us your perspective.